Good morning, everybody. I'm Chad Kulis, Executive Director of the Midway Chamber of Commerce. And every year we do our celebration of nonprofits. Normally we get to be with all of you in the same room at Hamline University. This year it's a little different, of course, but the fun thing is we get to focus on multiple different topics. And I think we're really leading off today with a topic that's going to be so important for so many nonprofits on how to reach your donors, especially for annual events that are going to be done virtually now. And we do this in partnership with Hamline University, and they've been a great partner of ours for many years now. And at this point, I want to turn it over to our partner. Please welcome from Hamline, Jeannie Fox.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy you're joining us today in our new way. We're not meeting for breakfast today, but I hope you've got something good nearby. I've certainly got my cup of coffee. And I'm super excited about this topic because little background, our guest Glen Fladeboe and I each grew up in the same part of Minnesota, farm country down in Southwest Minnesota. And I grew up going to farm auctions with my parents, just like Glen and his dad and the rest of the family were conducting. And I've watched Glen over the years take this model and move into helping nonprofits have fabulous events. And we're going to hear today about how does fundraising change when we're meeting like this. So let me quickly turn it over to Glen Fladeboe of Fladeboe Advancement.
Jenny, thank you, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. So one thing, first of all, let me share my background with everybody. As Jeannie said, I grew up on a farm in the Wilmer area in West Central Minnesota, and my dad started our business 40 some years ago. And I grew up in a traditional auction business. I also grew up on a farm where, he would do antique auctions and farm auctions and land auctions and everything. And I actually went to Hamline. So I have a degree from Hamline University. I have a communications degree. And the business that I have now was founded at Drew Hall. I started it when I was 19 years old in Drew Hall, which is one of the dorms on Hamline's campus. So basically, I graduated with a degree in communications and then went on to work for WCCO TV, and I worked at the legislature for a number of years. But then while I was doing that, I was still working, doing these little events for nonprofits. So they'd hire me to come and auction a few items, etc. And long story short, what happened is my dad ended up having a heart attack and then a stroke. He actually had a stroke the morning of my wedding. And our business went from 20 years ago doing 30 of these events a year to going to 50 to 90 to 150 to now, 300 nonprofits. So our company works with about 300 nonprofits in a traditional non-COVID year all over the country. So we're based in Minnesota in the Twin Cities, but we have clients on the East Coast, West Coast, and the upper Midwest. And the first thing, I want to make this informative this morning. We're going to have fun with this. I'll share with you some of the most interesting stories that I've learned about raising money online and how it's different than what we've done in our old space of being together. But if everyone could take a moment, and you certainly don't have to share, but it's helpful for me because it gives me some context about, some of the insights that I can share with you about different strategies for nonprofits and raising money based on your connection or what your organization is. So Kathy, you don't even have to go because I know what organization you're with, of course, but if folks could just tell me what you hope to get out of this presentation, and specifically if kind of your insight or your interest in this is based on a larger nonprofit, a smaller nonprofit, are there immediate financial needs? And again, not everybody needs to pipe up, but if you'd like to share that with me, it's helpful for me to hear. You can also do it in the chat too, if you want. I can take a look at this. So anyone have any specifics about that?
I'll go. Good
Yeah.
morning, Glenn. Nancy,
Yeah,
Dana, nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
I am representing the little guys and nonprofit schools.
Oh,
so
great.
It's how can we convince people to fund schools when they appropriately believe schools should be publicly funded?
Yeah.
And that's not enough. And also, I'm unclear how to reach the millennials and the younger people my generation is getting kind of tapped out or dying, frankly. So it's how do we engage the young? I know they're into environment. I know they're into, saving a lot of really good causes, but I need them to also be involved in education.
Yeah. Nancy, let me share this with you. Feel free to contact me after this. I will also share with you some of the insight that we're learning about raising money for public schools right now when schools are closed, and a little bit of the disconnect about, families aren't together, and a little bit of angst or anger about not being in school and how that changes it. Michael John, I am so happy to hear that you're on this. I just got an email, or Michael John, who's with Park Square, was with Park Square, is now with the St. Paul Parks. Michael John, it's so good to hear from you. I've actually thought of you many times. I knew that you were over there now. He's looking at raising funds with the prospect of being shut down until 2022. Yeah, I will certainly address that. I just actually was working on an issue with the Children's Theater yesterday about that very issue. Proof Alliance, so another great organization, working on our April benefit now, hoping to raise the same amounts like the past few years, so we can certainly go over that. Anyone else want to share kind of what you hope to get out of this?
Looks like Lynn Megan has her hand up. Lynn?
Hi, Lynn Megan, mid-sized nonprofit employment supports for people with disabilities. Looking to add donors, new donors.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lynn. Anyone else? So feel free to weigh in too as we go through this, and if you want to pipe up with specific questions, we'll make this really kind of conversational, and I'm happy to address pieces, specific questions that you have as we go. So, here's basically what happened for us. Last March, the middle of March, I'll never forget it. I was out at my wife's farm in South Dakota in February. Her grandpa had passed away, and I was monitoring international news of the schools being shut down in Japan and South Korea because of COVID. And I believed that we were in a serious situation here. And I emailed our employees. We have about 10 team members and employees that work with us. And I was obviously very concerned that, something significant was going to happen in the United States that wouldn't allow us to gather. By the middle of March, we had about 140 events scheduled from the middle of March to the end of June that we were planning to do all over Minnesota and all over the country. And by the end of March, 95 of them had canceled their event, postponed their event, or started to contemplate doing virtual events. And literally our first virtual event that we did was for an organization called MICC, which is Minnesota Independence Community and College. It's an organization that basically assists adults that can kind of live on their own, but they also need some assistance. And that event we did, within 3 days of their original in-person event was planned, and we had to pivot to a virtual event in 3 days to do it. But here's the big picture piece, and I want to be blunt when I share this with everyone. I am not going to try to convince all of you that, a virtual event or how we're doing it is an end-all, prove-all method. I think the top lines of the success speaks for themselves. We are raising tons of money. They are working. There's many benefits. We're figuring out what's driving how to people to give, what's creating interest with them, et cetera. The bigger issue, though, whether you do a virtual event or not, and our company studies this, not only the giving patterns and the trends here in Minnesota, but really what are the best fundraising professionals saying across the country? And here's the number one thing I can share with you, and probably the most important thing that I hope you get out of this presentation. The very worst thing that you can do as a nonprofit is nothing. Absolutely the worst thing that you can do. So I don't care if you're small, medium, or large, you have to engage. You have to do something and continually ask for support, get your message out, etc. At the end of the year, we will have done probably 135 to 140 virtual events by the end of 2020. So from the end of March to the end of December, someplace around there. I don't believe that I will have, I'll be shocked if I have 3 clients that tell me that they were sad or disappointed that they went forward with doing a virtual event. I think 98% of them will say, thank the Lord we did something. I think the overall feedback has been, we are just super blessed that we plowed forward. And a part of this is, I'll never forget, I got to know Hubert Jolet, who was the former CEO of Best Buy. Best Buy is one of our clients. And we do the Best Buy Foundation event. And I've known him now for a number of years. And I ask his advice from time to time when I see him. And I said to him, I said, Hubert, what was the secret when Best Buy was struggling and you needed to do something different? What was the secret? And he told me something I'll never forget. He said, Glenn, I told the employees at Best Buy, this is like riding a bike. We have to keep pedaling. If we quit pedaling, we will be dead. And I think I've said that to many of our clients right now. I've said that to our employees, that we have to engage. So I think the big picture piece is you have to do something. And I think there's a number of different options that you can look at. You can do a traditional virtual event. Well, I'll give you some examples of. You can do an email campaign. You can do a video-based campaign for 5 or 6 days. You can participate in the Give to Minnesota, Give to the Max Day. But you have to figure out how to engage your donors in this environment where we can't gather in person. So, that's the big piece of this. The other thing I'll just share with everyone, I don't believe that my business and my life will ever be like it was. I don't think that I will ever get back to a point where there won't be a virtual component of our business. And it's changed dramatically in 6 months, meaning going forward, the upside of communicating online of the costs are so much lower. I just had a client that I did 5 virtual events, a national client that we condensed 5 regional events into one event. So we hosted it here in Minnesota, but they didn't do their event in Seattle, Phoenix, Atlanta, and Chicago. We did one here. Their costs went down by $250,000 because they didn't have 5 ballrooms, they didn't have all those dinners, they didn't have the decor and all of the above. So, I think that we're at a period of time. I've also stated to a number of clients that this is like the wild, wild west. I mean, we're figuring out as we go, but basically there's very few boundaries. People can participate when they want, they can log on from anywhere, the costs are super low. A big part of where the virtual event business is going to be the on demand. So you can participate in a virtual event tonight at 7 o'clock. And if that doesn't work, you can do it 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So there's a number of different options. And I think the big thing that I would look at would be, what is the right fit for your organization? The other thing I'm happy to share with everybody is, feel free to contact us. I mean, we are, I'm happy to give you advice, even if we're not working with you, what would be the best fit for your group, because not every nonprofit should hire a video company, go through all the steps to do a major virtual event if you're not going to attract the right people or enough people to it. Here's the main top lines that I can share with you about kind of the fundraising success. Overall, we are raising a lot of money. I mean, we've had a good year. 80% of our clients are reaching their goals, even their stretch goals. The net revenue, that's the number to look at, is the net revenue is the target. So the gross revenue for a lot of virtual events will be lower because of the giving challenges of just not having donors in the room, et cetera, but the costs are also lower. So the net revenue is coming in as a very, very good number. And so we're super pleased with that. We're pleased that people, I've been interviewed by a number of news organizations in the last 6 months of people saying, well, Glenn, will there be virtual event fatigue? Will people be sick of these things by October? And I didn't believe that would happen. And it's certainly proven to be true that did not happen. And for a number of different reasons. And I think, I have shared this with a lot of folks. People predicted the demise of in-person events for 15 years. People would say to me every year, yeah, we're sick of the galas. They're going to discontinue. People are tired of them. The donors are fatigued. But the truth is, every year we were raising more money, more people were showing up, we were more profitable than the year before. And yes, there were a certain set of donors that cycled out, but then there was new donors that came into it. So I just took the position that when you look at human behavior of giving, I just didn't believe that people would not log on for 30 minutes of time, the end of October of 2020, when in the old world, they were having to give 4 hours of their time to drive to a ballroom or a hotel. And I think the evidence is overwhelming that that is true, specifically here in Minnesota, that people are rallying, people are gathering, etc. Let me give you the big picture when I'm talking about a virtual event, because I know that not all of you will have participated in a bunch of them. I'm sure that some of you have, but not everybody knows kind of the structure of what they look like. So when we are talking about a virtual event, so let's say your nonprofit is considering doing a virtual event, and let's say you're considering doing it in late February of 2021. The template that most organizations are following is this, which is a 30 to 35 minute video-based presentation, either live or taped. So it's a video-based presentation with a live element or completely taped elements that will air or play at a certain time on a certain date. So traditionally within that 35 minutes, what's included is a mission-based welcome, a history of the organization, and these are all 2-minute segments, a history of the organization, a clear, concise messaging of why these funds are important. There's perhaps an entertainment component. There could be a singer, there could be a student doing something, there could be a cooking demonstration, you name it. There could be an entertainment demonstration. A lot of times there is a presentation of the action items if you're promoting action items, but the key piece of the entire presentation is the mission-based giving moment, or what we call the funded need giving moment. And let me put this in context for everybody. When I started our business, when I was a freshman at Hamlin, I was auctioning pies in the basement of churches and on Summit Avenue, selling pies for $200 and things like that. And the whole idea of a funded need, like people just raising their hands to give money, I mean, that was just a complete foreign concept 20 years ago. In 2020, this year, our clients will raise around $35 million of the virtual events that we've been involved with. And likely 28 million of that will be direct contributions that nobody bought a trip to Africa, nobody bought a wine dinner, nobody bought, a Gucci purse. They just made a contribution. And so the funded need mission-based giving is really the heart and soul of our entire business. And it's really the heart and soul of a virtual event, is asking folks to make a gift directly to support your mission. And night after night after night, that is the most powerful tool in the toolbox of raising money. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. So the entire presentation is short. People can bid for auction items. When you do have auction items, the auction will open, usually 4 days in advance. The auction may end that night, and people are bidding online. So like when I'm talking about auction items, it's really a silent auction on an auction platform and a bidding platform. So, we have not been approaching this that an auctioneer is actually auctioning a trip in real time. Most of it is promoting these items, and then people are bidding online. So that's kind of the big picture of what these virtual events look like. The other thing I'm happy to do is I'm happy to share, if you email me and if you want examples with organizations like yours, I'm happy to send you some video-based examples. So you can look at 3 or 4 of these presentations, and it gives you a pretty good template of what's working, what's the right fit, etc. Here's the most important piece, far more important than what these events look like. We get a call about every day from a nonprofit thinking or considering of doing a virtual event. So about 1 hour of my day every day is talking to some new client. It could be here in Minnesota, it could be in, yesterday it was in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, the day before it was in Arizona. Just day after day, somebody calls and they're saying, Glenn, we're considering doing a virtual event. What's your advice, or what do we need to think about? And here's the number one thing that I can share with you. And this is applicable to whether you're doing a virtual event or whatever you're doing online raising money right now. And here's the main thing that we found with raising money online, and I'll also talk a little bit about how it's different than in person. If Glen Fladeboe is the only one excited about doing a virtual event for your organization, don't do it. That's the number one thing I can share with you, which is there has to be energy and passion. And the dead giveaway for me is if I'm doing one of these calls and a committee has said, yeah, we've got 10 people super excited about doing this. Let's set up a Zoom call next week. The committee's excited, they're passionate, they want to roll up their sleeves, they believe it's important. They think raising money right now is critical. That's the #1 giveaway to me that you're going to have a good event. If I'm on a Zoom call and it's the executive director and that's the only person excited about the need to raise $100,000 in the next 6 months, that is concerning to me. And so there has to be a commitment from the board and your core supporters that yes, let's engage, yes, let's do this, yes, let's plow forward. Because when I look back at 2020, and if I look at the 140 events that we did, it would not be true for me to say every night was spectacular. They weren't all spectacular. The vast majority of them were successful. But when I look at segments, so small nonprofits, mid-sized nonprofits, and large nonprofits, the #1 variable of how well they did was their energy and passion with their board, their core supporters. And night after night, that is true. And that was also true in our old business. And I will also share with you, 70% of raising money online is the exact same as what we knew about raising money in person. So our starting place when we had to go to the online virtual world was we believed that we were on the 70-yard line of knowing what we needed to know to do well raising money online, and that has proven to be true. So the second thing I'll share with you is people will say to me, and let me put this in the context of you raising $100,000. So if you called me and said, Glenn, we need to raise $100,000 in February, what do we do? The first thing I would say is there energy and passion with your group? The second thing that I would really look at is, are there some donors that are willing to pre-commit in advance to work towards that goal? And that's a huge part of the virtual event business. So many of our even prospective clients and our existing clients will call, and this is applicable to whether you're doing a virtual event or raising money in a different format online. They will call and they'll say, Glenn, we have this idea of what our presentation looks like and that idea of what their presentation looks like. And all of that's important, but here's the truth of it. 70% of your success has nothing to do with what happens the night of your virtual event. It does the variables of whether it's super interesting or mildly interesting make a difference, but it's not the big picture. It's the pre-work that is critical. And so we put a very high emphasis on pre-raising a fair amount of money. And I'll give you a good example of this, and it's super interesting to me. So about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I got a call from an organization in Palm Springs, California, that is a land trust organization. We actually do a fair amount of work for environmental groups. And this was a land trust that is putting permanent conservation easements on like beautiful ridges of hiking trails. So they're basically protecting this land that it can never be developed. And right now, of course, raising money for healthcare and food in an economic time like we're in is certainly a little easier climb than raising money for land conservation in Palm Springs. But the committee, when I was doing the call, they said, Glenn, we will commit to doing a really good job of pre-raising money, because I was concerned about this. They told me about their giving patterns in the last couple of years, and I was concerned that we couldn't hit $110,000 for their virtual event. But they did tell me that they will absolutely commit to that. And today, or yesterday, I did a Zoom call with them preparing for their event next week. They've already raised $70,000 towards their $110,000 goal. And here's why this is important. When the virtual audience comes together and we're making the presentation and the goal is $110,000 and it shows that we've already raised $60,000, it's affecting the mindset and the thought process of everybody online. So what I'm getting to is you have to have commitment to pre-raise some of the money, because the pre-raise support is affecting how people give. The other thing that we found, and this is really interesting to me intellectually, is that once you're 65 to 70% way towards your goal, so let's say the goal again is 100,000, and let's say that you've now raised 65,000 or 70,000 of pre-raise support. What we're tracking is gift size increases and participation rate increases of donors online once you're 65 to 70% way to your goal. Because what we believe is happening is it's actually putting subtle or some pressure on people and excitement that people feel that the goal is obtainable. Because in the old world, if I was standing at a ballroom at the Hilton Hotel and I'm trying to raise $100,000 in revenue, you know, people would raise their card for $5,000 or $2,500, and then everyone's looking around at their table and they're like, well, Jeannie Fox just raised her card for $2,500. I better give $1,000. But at home, nobody knows if Jeannie Fox actually made a gift or not, or she's just drinking wine. So we can't use the same strategies because we could change the giving patterns in person because of how people were interacting based on watching other people. So online, what we need to do is we need to motivate people to participate financially by motivating towards that goal, but then having a fair amount of pre-raise support in advance that gets us to that.
Hey,
The other,
Glenn,
yeah, go ahead.
just a quick question about that. I was on one of the virtual galas recently, and they were doing the fund a need portion, and the moderator MC was shouting out to different people. So they were saying, and I see that Glenn has come in for $100. Jeannie's come in for $100. Is that a good strategy?
Good question. It's a good strategy if you use their first names. It's not a good strategy to use their first and last names because a lot of Minnesotans don't want, they want to be, they're not comfortable with that, with you sharing their entire name. There are benefits though of that. And I'll share one other piece that we're doing. Let me just shut my blind here. The other thing that we're doing is that even if that's not happening in real time. So let's say Jeannie Fox, that I know Jeannie's going to give $2,500 to Neighborhood House, and I'm raising money doing a virtual event for Neighborhood House. So Jeannie doesn't have to make the gift right when I'm doing it. Let's say that she and her husband give the gift 2 weeks before. I will still call Jeannie's name out either live or taped, not to, and what I'm essentially doing is I'm leveraging her gift to motivate others. So Chad, to answer your question, it is helpful, but you have to be careful how you do it, is the thing. The other thing that you have to be a little careful is a lot of times in real time, these donations are not coming in quick enough that I can actually say like, oh, thank you to Jeannie Fox for her gift of $2,500. Thank you to Nancy for her gift. Thank you to Lynn for her gift, because they're not happening in real time. So what you want to do is use some of the pre-raised dollar support and those family names and have that in your back pocket. Let me hit the other kind of big picture pieces, and then I'm going to give you a few examples. So again, if you said to me, Glenn, we want to raise $100,000, how do we do this? I would say, is there passion, number one? Is there a commitment to pre-raise money? Number two, that you'll do the work to pre-raise money. Number three, what is your core message? And when I say what is your core message, can we state in a paragraph or two why this is critical? And I think that that's a really important exercise. So when we're hired by a client, I'll ask our clients to say, I'll give them a few days, but I'll say, send me an email with one paragraph that if you were standing in front of an audience of 5,000 people and we were asking for $100,000, what would you say? Like, how can we boil this down into clear 2 or 3 key takeaways of why this is critical? Because once your key message is in place, it allows you to actually do a better job raising some pre-support with those donors in advance because you're sharing that key message. And I could talk for a long time on key messages, but I think that is a big deal. And I think many of our clients do a poor job of communicating the top line paragraph of why this is important. Let me just say this one other way. And I shared this with a lot of clients in our old world, which is if somebody's had 2 glasses of wine or 2 beers or 3 beers, and they're after the event, they walk out to their car with their spouse. Can they turn to their spouse and say, I get it. Here's what the money is going to do tonight. If they can't do that, we have failed in messaging and communication. And a big part of what we're trying to do is at the end of this virtual event, I want a husband and wife to be able to turn to themselves in the kitchen and say, I get it, we get it. We have a clear understanding of how the revenue is important. And I think that's an important exercise of this. The other key piece with this is then driving attendance to your virtual event space. So, that is pre-support with all of your donors in advance, your email lists, your calls. And I don't consider myself a social media expert, but the one thing that I can tell you, and I could give you 50 examples in the last 60 days from this, is that let's say your virtual event is next Tuesday night, and let's say you're a mid-sized nonprofit in the Midway area. I would email people literally every day, and I'd email them 4 times in the last 48 hours leading to your event, because what we're seeing is it takes almost 7 emails before people are opening them and actually fulfilling the registration process. In addition to the emails, I would do calls, I would do personal notes that are actually mailed to people. And you almost have to look at these virtual events and raising money kind of like how the folks in the political world look at turning out voters. I mean, you have to just be really prolific. But the one thing that I've really learned, and we've really counseled our clients in the last 2 months, is you cannot be bashful that last 48 hours. You cannot. And the registration will spike up in the last 48 hours. There were a number of large events that we were working on that I will be completely frank, I was concerned, very concerned for them, that the registration was not where it should be. And all of a sudden it just spiked up the last 3 days because they were super aggressive and really reached out to folks. Let me give you one last piece, and I'm going to share a few of the specific strategies in our slide. One thing that's been interesting to me, it's actually been so surprising, is that we, of course, consult on the auction packages, like signature live auction packages, because when we're sending an auctioneer to these virtual events or an in-person event, we're still selling auction items and it's still raising a fair amount of money. But the auction piece right now, specifically the silent auction piece, has become a major tool with virtual events. And it's been fascinating to look at. So let's say, like we did an event last week for Habitat for Humanity in St. Cloud. And it was a breakfast event, a breakfast virtual event. They had a silent auction open that was open for 5 days before the event. They had more excitement of people bidding on that silent auction for 5 days than I would have ever dreamt. I would have never imagined 6 months ago that like the bidding was crazy. People had fun. They came back every day. It drove people to the site. It kept people interested. It allowed people to watch their virtual event after the event. So you can really use the auction as a tool to get people into your virtual space. And I'll even say it specifically for folks, mid-sized nonprofit in the Midway area, you guys doing a virtual event and having an auction that drives people into your space or onto your site, it's a really helpful tool. And it's been surprising to me, I think, how critical that will be in the next year of, and a part of it is people are looking at ways to support nonprofits, but they're also looking at getting something in return by bidding on these items. Before I move on, are any questions so far on kind of the big picture pieces of the virtual events? And let me just look at some of the chats. I'd love to hear how to be innovative and creative to get beyond the burnout I think people are experiencing with forcing connections online. Christine, that's a really good question. Let me also just address that. I think when I look at where the virtual event business or online fundraising will be in 2021, it's not going to be that we're going to force everybody into a Zoom meeting at 7 o'clock on a Thursday night. I don't think that that's going to be the strategy. I think the strategy will be try to get people to participate in the Zoom event at 7 o'clock on a Thursday night. But if you'd rather give your gift or make a gift or help or do something different the morning after, the morning before, that's completely fine. So that's been a mind shift for me. I believe 6 months ago that, it'll be the Common Bond event will be this night and let's drive 800 people to the Common Bond event that night. I believe now that it'll be the Common Bond week and people will be participating whenever they want. Yes, many people will come to that virtual event at that given time, but we're not going to really look at the business like that. The second thing that I would say is this pre-raising event money or pre-raising dollars. Many of our large gifts that have been given, they're not people online making a gift that night. The family could care less if they're watching it, but they're still giving $10,000 to support Common Bond. We are messaging why their support is important and thanking that family. So basically approaching this that we're not going to force everybody to participate, but there's still ways that you can support the campaign of a virtual event. And the virtual event, we really say, is a campaign. It's not just one night. And so I think that that's ways to do it. The last thing that I will say, Christine, to your question, which I think you put your finger on probably the most important thing right now. 5 years from now, if I'm presenting to a group like yours, I believe that what I will say is that we and companies like mine just didn't figure out ways and strategies to raise money online. The nonprofits and the companies that were super successful were the ones that made meaningful connections with people after the event. And I cannot say that more strongly. So I think it is an entirely failed strategy to just run a campaign to get to $100,000, but not have a good idea of how we thank these donors, make them feel appreciated, really highlight what we're doing with the money, giving them updates throughout the year of asking for their opinion. And I think that that will be the core thing that will determine why some nonprofits succeed or not. That piece is going to be the most important piece. And I will also say, I think a lot of groups are doing a poor job with it. And I hate to be that blunt, but I am going to just be blunt with it, because people will get sick of the gimmicks. Just, it's not going to, the shiny object to get somebody online that's going to get old if you're not actually connecting the dots and saying what you did for Common Bond was critical. And I think that also really speaks to opportunities for mid-sized groups of, you can attract donors to your organization and get them there online, and you can find a new donor that's going to become a big donor if you can keep them and make them feel appreciated and why their gift was critical. So the other thing right now is that your ability to find new donors is significant with these events. Like a mid-sized nonprofit in the Midway area that's able to share their message and communicate it, and we're not forcing people to drive to a ballroom and all of a sudden somebody falls in love with your group. I mean, it's really become a tool of finding new donors, which has been a big deal. Any other questions? And I'll quickly share a couple strategies or specific strategies. Okay, let me just go to the share screen, the PowerPoint. Share. So just bear with me, I'm gonna scroll down here. This is a presentation we did to the Council of Nonprofits. So I'm just gonna highlight 4 specific strategies and I'm happy to answer any questions. This is a presentation we did 2 weeks ago for a bunch of the Council of Nonprofits on basically a detailed outline of how to raise money with these virtual events or online. I'm not going to get into too much depth on this because I talked a little bit about this before. I think strategy number 1 that you want to look at is mission-centered messaging. And this was true in our old world before COVID. This is true today. And it really speaks to, can you, in one paragraph, describe to everybody why this is important? And there's a lot of good examples of this. I'll just share a couple. One, this was an event, Tubman is one of our clients. It's a domestic shelter in the domestic violence space. And when we did their virtual event in early May, they really messaged that right off the top, that for many people, the most dangerous place to be is in their home. And so what we did is we messaged that throughout the entire program, throughout almost every segment, and that message consistency was critical. And so I really put a high emphasis on that. The other thing I'll just share with you, let's say that you need $100,000, but it's general fund money. Just bear with me, you guys. My puppy is clawing at my door and I need to send him out. Just give me one moment here.
While Glenn is taking care of his dog, just a reminder, if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat. It sounds like Glenn is pretty open to, if you just have a question that you want to say instead of put on chat, you can probably unmute yourself and do that as well. Okay, back to you, Glenn.
This is a different world when my puppy is in my office. So if you need to raise $100,000, but you're not raising it for something specific, that's still fine. But craft your top line message that gives them examples of what the 100,000. So you don't have to say, we're raising 100,000, it'll go to X. You can say, such as, or here's an example of what the funds will do. We believe that's highly critical. The second thing is activate your advocates. This speaks to what I said at the very top, that if Glenn is the only one excited, then we're in trouble. But there's multi-pronged benefits of there's a number of strategies that we have to have with our board and key supporters for this thing to be successful. And I'm going to give you a good example with this. So if the board's excited, the committee's excited, et cetera, it's a really, really helpful tool on a whole number of levels. Be the Matches are one of our clients. They're based here in Minnesota, but we do events across the country for them. And this is a really good example of this. So let's say that you're doing the virtual event, and let's say you're going to do it in early March. And let's say again that your goal is to raise $100,000. So if you create a subcommittee of, let's say, 4 board members and 4 other committee members, that could be supporters or passionate supporters or people or event chairs or whatever, create that group and then give them specific action steps that they can take that will be highly consequential to the success. So it could be action steps of pre-raising dollars, of developing a list of everyone that we're trying to invite for the event, getting the word out of what the core messaging is, et cetera. And I'm using Be the Match as an example because we did a national virtual event for them in the end of September. They also collapsed like 5 regional events across the country. And so their event was in the end of September, and we did a kickoff call with their advocates. And they had advocates basically across the country. And when I did this presentation to that group, the advocates, there were 80 people on the Zoom presentation all across the country. And I knew right away that they'd have a great virtual event because there was passion, there was energy, there was clear takeaways of what they could do, et cetera. So, that's another key piece of this, is develop this advocate team and give them clear, actionable strategies. The other thing we could do is I'm happy to share some more specifics of the action steps that are really helpful for them. Let me get to number 3, execute well. And when I spend time talking about this, I want to be clear when I say this to everyone. Some of these virtual events, when I look back at my portion of it, there's nights that I look at my portion or the entire event, and if I told you it's the best video in the world, that would be a stretch. I mean, there's nights that I look at this stuff and I'm like, that wasn't the most professional. It was fun, it was mission-based, et cetera. But it doesn't need to look like the Grammys. It needs to be executed well. And when I say executed well, it is a short length of time. You keep the program short and to the point, key message stated within the first few minutes. You introduce a match donor, or if you're introducing some of your match components early in the program, you ask for gifts at the right time, not at the very end, and it really creates a bond with the audience. And so executing well is highly important. And there's a lot of examples. I'm going to give you just a couple examples here at the end that I'll share with you. Here's one, the example, or there's 4 examples that I'm going to share when we look at executing well. And I put a very high emphasis on this word, the authenticity piece. Authenticity wins the day. So the top picture is me doing a virtual event at the Jungle Theater in South Minneapolis. That is me and the interim executive director, and one of their auction items that was a cloud. It was a prop from one of their plays that we were selling. And so a lot of these presentations, they don't have to be super professional. This was actually shot by an iPhone camera, and it was grainy, it was gritty, but it was very real, it was authentic, it shared the importance of giving. As you can see, the backdrop is an empty theater, and we really drilled down into, this is a tough time for theaters. The example on the left of the pig, that was a school in Maryland. We worked on a virtual event in Maryland in April, and they had a talking pig. It was a child's voice that came over, did the voiceover of the talking pig, and it was just something fun to kind of throw a twist at people. The one on the my right is the National Lutheran Choir, where they dressed up and made it kind of look like it was the Grammys, and they kind of had fun with it. I think they were all wearing shorts, or the men were wearing shorts underneath their tuxedos or something like that. The bottom picture is from Feed My Starving Children. We do a bunch of work for Feed My Starving Children, and they used an empty warehouse as a visual to really highlight, the challenge of COVID right now. So, it doesn't have to be the most professional video, but it has to be authentic, it has to be meaningful, and you have to make it the right connection. Strategy number 4 is basically what I highlighted in regards to the question about really what we'll learn 5 years from now. So build a relationship. And I do believe it's a very flawed strategy just to look at online fundraising as a short-term step to fill a financial hole. I think you have to look at it as a multi-pronged strategy to fill a financial hole, find new donors, steward these donors, remind them of the passion, excitement, and the importance of your mission, but then build a meaningful bond with them after the event. And the evidence is overwhelming. The key steps to do that, which is you have to thank in a timely and authentic manner. You know, people are saying thank you notes, handwritten thank you notes are as important as ever. You have to communicate the outcomes in a meaningful way. And you have to learn about the preferences and motivations of donors. And I'll give you a good example of this. We did an event for Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota, is one of our clients. We do a number of events for them, and they have a large, very large event in September. And some of their new donors that gave at their virtual event, we're reaching out to just to do a quick call with them and almost like a mini survey. So reaching out to Jan Anderson and saying, Jan, thank you for your giving to LSS. You know, share with us why you gave, or what interests you, or what's personal to you, or what motivated you. We're trying to find out and learn some preferences and motivation from these donors. And I think that that's a really helpful step to look at. So I'm also happy to send this slide presentation to folks if they want as well. Bidding platforms, I won't get into a lot of detail right now on that, but here are the key things you do need to have in place if you're going to do a virtual event. You need to have a video producer, somebody that's going to help you with the video. So a videographer and the technical assistance to do the video, whether it's live or taped, and get it online. You're also going to need a bidding platform or pledging platform. They're one and the same. There's many different companies. There's national companies and state-based companies. The price points are kind of all over. Every company right now is racing to produce the very best platform. So what's going to be available 6 months from now will be remarkable compared to what's available now. And again, I'd be happy to give you references for that. Yeah, and basically what we do as a company, so a lot of our work is not just sending our auctioneers to do, you know, pieces online and, you know, hosting these virtual events. The lion's share of what we're doing is consulting and advising with our clients on the core strategies to have these things be successful. So that's kind of the big picture of what we're doing. Questions, or what did I miss? Or feel free to give me specific questions of what you're contemplating. I'm also happy to give you some specific advice if you have specific questions right now about a virtual event that you're planning. Here, hit stop share.
Glenn, I'll start. I think a lot of nonprofits are looking at their budget this year, looking at the different formats and saying, I don't think I can afford to hire a company to help me with my event because I just want to have the minimal expenses I can. Could you share reasons why it's still important to hire a company to help?
Good question, Chad.
And I swear I did not set that up with Glenn ahead of time.
Yeah, he did not. Here's the truth, and I can honestly tell you this, whether you hire us or somebody else, like a simple decision will likely make, in the $100,000 case example, a simple decision will make a $15,000 difference. And like we see that day after day after day after day. Like, and I'm not saying this is putting a feather in our cap, but I would bet my life, maybe that's a little strong. I bet that puppy that I just had to remove from my office, that we will raise the Friends of the Desert Mountains $50,000 more money than they would have raised if they wouldn't have hired us, because of the pre-event strategy of raising money for their event. And so, you know, I get that everyone needs to hold the line on costs, but, and I'm saying this to other companies, whether you didn't hire us, but get some professional help, because it's critical. The other thing is what we're learning today, what I know today compared to what I knew 6 weeks ago is significant, you know? So sometimes I think the big piece is people can make penny wise and pound foolish choices with holding the line on a budget item. Let me see if in the chat. Thank you for understanding the puppy deal, Marie. From the Marie Sundance Foundation. Any other questions or feedback, or if I got too in depth with pieces? Kathy, sponsorship benefits that are unique in a virtual. Yeah, Kathy asked a great question. Sponsorship benefits that are unique in a virtual format. Fascinating right now. I mean, there's so many opportunities with different sponsorship ideas. I mean, you can have a presenting sponsor, you can have an auction sponsor, you can have, there's so many different things that are happening. And really, I think, Kathy, you could speak to this too from your experience. It's almost like we're having to rewrite the entire template of sponsorships and how to approach sponsorships with events. The one thing I'll share with you, two things I'll share with you. Number one, it is shocking to me and super uplifting that sponsorships have been super strong. It is not true to say that sponsorships have not been strong in 2020 or the fall of 2020. So we are seeing companies support our nonprofits. The overwhelming evidence speaks to that, which is the upside. The second thing I would say is have your sponsorships, give them an opportunity to make it personal. I think that that's a big thing. So if I was a corporate executive, or let's say I was running the Walgreens on, CVS on Snelling and in university, and I was a sponsor to one of your groups, have a manager share why they're doing this, why they think it's important. I think sponsors are going to see that as beneficial. So it's not just some logo that says CVS. It will be somebody saying, this is why we're doing this as a company. We believe it's critical. I think those are some of the packages we're looking at, that in addition to sponsorships getting their logo and other pieces, that they're actually a part of sharing their story with folks, why they're doing this.
Glenn, a lot of galas like this, they happen on a weekend, on a Saturday night. But it seems like the last thing people want to do nowadays is, after a long week of staring at Zoom meetings, to then open up their laptop and do it again on Saturday night. Do you have a certain time of day and time of the week that you recommend people do these events now?
Yeah, it depends on your group. It depends on the size of your group and a little bit of the legacy and history of your event. That said, though, what you put your finger on is a big deal. We have encouraged more of our clients to do their event on a non-Saturday night because of competition, because of exactly that issue. So you don't have to do it on a Saturday night. Matter of fact, Saturday night may be the worst choice for you. So I think we need to be open to innovative different ideas. We're actually doing a lot of Wednesday and Thursday night events. But it also speaks to, even now going forward, we're not designing and building the strategy about everybody being online Wednesday night, that they can participate Tuesday morning or Thursday morning, etc. So let's see what else.
Are there any last questions here for Glenn? We have a couple minutes left.
It just occurs to me, talking about the puppy in your room there, Glenn, that puppies probably, if you held that up, I would probably give a donation for the food or something, because it gets those endorphins going.
Yeah. Well, and we're trying to do things that are different, just unique and different. And one thing I'll share with everybody personally, I've been doing this for 20 years. So for the last 20 years of my life, I have never had this many Fridays and Saturday nights in my house since probably I lived at my parents' farm when I was in high school. I mean, it's been life-changing for me, because for 20 years, I was night after night, I was in a ballroom and doing this. And intellectually, this has been fascinating to me, just fascinating. Because what we're doing is we're studying data sets every Monday. So if we're doing 5 to 7 virtual events a week, then we're able to look at the giving patterns and look at what's working and what's not. And I will tell you, what we know as a company today compared to what I knew in August is so different. And a lot of it, when I say so different in regards to refined strategies to raise more organic new money. Because the patterns are emerging, what's working and what's not. And so I've actually kind of embraced this moment. Just, for my business, obviously it's been a major disruption, but it's also been an opportunity to try things differently and be open and creative. And any other last questions? The last thing I'll just say to everybody, I want to thank you for what you're doing for nonprofits. This is hard. Raising money is not easy. It's important that we work together. It's important that they're successful. And we are happy to be helpful in any way that we can, whether we're involved or not. So thank you for your participation. Chad, I want to thank you for your leadership as well.
Well, thank you, Glenn. And I would encourage all the nonprofits on the call that if you're thinking about doing an event, before you actually do it and really start preparing for it, check out other virtual events. You probably have been invited to a few different galas. Check them out and just see what you like and what you don't like about them. And I think that's going to help guide you in what you want to do as you plan. So thank you again, Glenn. Thanks everybody for attending. Again, I want to thank our sponsors. Our title sponsor is Episcopal Homes. We have supporting sponsors, Riverland Bank, Mendoza Law Office. You are going to be hearing from them at different sessions that we have. Our next session, next Thursday, same time, is going to be with the Council of Nonprofits. They've done some survey work this year. Maybe some of you participate in those surveys. So they're getting a little bit better idea from the nonprofits in our community, what's working for them, what help they need. And I think we're going to be able to learn a lot from the survey work that they do next week. Thank you, everybody. This recording will be available. So are the PowerPoint, and you'll be getting email about both of them later today. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
Great.